Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics and 8 days until the election. 8 days until we decide what we're going to do with our country for the next generation, possibly. And in this video, what I'd like to do is to look at some of the factors that people will be using to decide on where their vote should go, but why it ultimately has to be based on Brexit, no matter what you think the most important factor is. But first, if you'd like to see more of my videos, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So there are a number of issues that people will consider to be of the utmost importance in this coming general election, and that is actually the only normal thing about this election. But whether your overriding concern is the NHS or education or the climate or the economy, I would argue that you need to make your vote based only on Brexit, and I'll explain why. So let's say you think healthcare is the most important issue. You would not be alone. After all, healthcare is something that we all need, and so will our loved ones. The ability to get access to consultations with a doctor when needed, and then have whatever treatment is best for your condition, is essential to quality of life. And being able to do this without having to worry about bills at the point at which you need it, when you're actually pretty vulnerable, is also essential for the vast majority of the population. So yes, a lot of people will put, understandably, healthcare as priority number one, as they do in every general election. However, the Conservatives have been undermining the NHS whenever they get into government and plan to finish it off completely by leaving the EU and sending it all off to the US. This is beyond dispute. It's laid out very clearly in US documentation of trade deals, as well as the newly surfaced British documentation as well. And although Donald Trump may agree to being a bit more circumspect about it when talking in Britain, he makes no secret of his plans when he's talking to journalists back in the States. The only thing that can possibly put a stop to this is remaining in the EU. That's it. That would render Trump's trade deal impossible. It doesn't even matter if Labour won the election. That wouldn't actually stop this. Of course, Labour would never sell off the NHS. They'd bolster its funding properly. Absolutely, no question about it. But they can't stay in power forever. They cannot be the defenders of the NHS from opposition. The Conservatives would get back in at some point, and then it's curtains. It would only take a few years, easily achievable inside a single parliament if we are not inside the EU. So if your top priority is healthcare, then your real top priority is stopping Brexit. And once that notion is accepted, well, the only way to stop Brexit is by voting for the candidate that will stop Boris Johnson getting a majority. It doesn't matter what that particular candidate's views on Brexit are. What matters is, will they support Boris Johnson's majority, yes or no? The answer needs to be no. But let's say your top priority is climate change. Again, you would be far from alone. After all, the damage we have been doing and continue to do is being increasingly irreversible. This has an impact not only on us, but on future generations as well, including the younger generation now that isn't able to vote for its own future. But the EU are forging ahead with a pro-green climate agenda. You may think it doesn't go far enough, but it goes further than the UK will outside of the EU. In addition, EU standards are only ever minima. So when we occasionally elect a good government, every now and then it happens, they are always free to exceed those standards. But if we leave the EU, then our standards will be lower, way lower. There is a reason why Boris Johnson removed environmental standards from the legally binding portion of Theresa May's withdrawal agreement. So if the UK leaves the EU, then the UK will be working against the green policies that more responsible nations are pushing. Again, not all the time. When we elect a good government, environmental laws will inevitably be tightened up. However, outside of the EU, they will be thrown on the bonfire the second the Conservatives are back in office, and they will keep coming back to office. We know from experience they're in government most of the time. And if you are fully seized of the notion that continued failure to act responsibly causes more permanent damage to the environment, then you simply cannot afford to allow Brexit to happen. So if the environment is your top priority, then in actual fact, Brexit is your most pressing concern. As such, stopping Boris Johnson again becomes your top priority. And the way to do that may well be tactical voting, depending on your constituency. So what if the economy is your most pressing concern? Well, this one's a bit of a piece of piss, really, isn't it? Not only have top independent economists said that Labour's policies would grow the economy and are very much in line with successful economies in Europe, but they've got nothing good to say about Conservative spending plans. So voting for Labour or the Liberal Democrats is much better for the economy than voting Conservative. In fact, quite frankly, voting for any of the major parties in Parliament is better than voting Conservative. But then Brexit leaches into this as well. The government's own figure suggests, far from saving us hundreds of millions a week, leaving the EU would cost us billions. And if that's the same Conservatives that were actively trying to push Brexit through coming up with those figures, imagine what the real cost will run to. So concern for the economy has to mean that, guess what's your top priority? That's right, Brexit. In fact, I can't think of a single election issue that doesn't turn into a top priority for Brexit in some form. The whole point about membership of the EU is collective responsibility and strength. This is something that Boris Johnson lacks and that his government want to do without. He will cast regulations into the fire on a whim. A lobbyist will just put a notion into his head that sort of makes sense to him and he'll just do it. He won't consider the consequences, he won't think about it, he won't even listen to those who want to warn him about the consequences. He will just do it. The only way to support what you consider to be the most important domestic issue is to stop Brexit, because Johnson opposes all of them. He doesn't care about the economy, about healthcare, about the environment, about law and order, about social care, about education, about workers' rights. All Boris Johnson cares about is Boris Johnson. So if you're a Labour supporter who can't bring yourself to vote Liberal Democrats because of Joe Swinson, and you're in a constituency where only the Liberal Democrats can beat the Tory candidate, that's your choice. You can and should exercise your vote as you see fit. But the responsibility that comes with that freedom is that you are enabling the worst Tory government we will ever have seen and delivering the hardest of Brexit. Similarly, if you're very anti-Corbyn and can't bear to vote for Labour on that basis in a constituency where Labour are the only ones placed to defeat the Conservatives, then the same applies. It's your decision, and I will never attack someone for voting according to their conscience, but it delivers Brexit and moves us one step closer to a fascist state by doing so. Yes, it would be absolutely fantastic, and indeed it should be the case in a democracy, that we should all be able to vote for a politician or a political party that we like. If we could only use our vote for what we believe in, that would be brilliant. But that is not the system that we have in the UK. We should do, but we don't. And I don't live in a world of what should be, but a world of what is. I'm pragmatic like that. And in a system that means that voting for what you most want actually, perversely, increases the chances of getting what you are most opposed to, there is no other choice than to vote tactically and pragmatically. All of the major parties that are not Boris Johnson are very different. This is true, and you may even oppose their core aims. But one thing they do have in common is that they are all committed to oppose Boris Johnson and his Brexit. And what's more, they are all committed to stopping it in exactly the same way in the next Parliament. That is another referendum with Remain as an option. And in addition, if Boris Johnson still forms the government, then all of those other parties are also committed to campaigning to Remain. And because they all agree on that, giving the numbers to do it will provide that outcome. But because no matter what happens, if Brexit goes ahead, we're vulnerable on healthcare, environmental standards, workers' rights, the economy, education and security. If Brexit doesn't go ahead, a Conservative government, whether now or later, can still do a great deal of damage to us. Of course they can. They have in the past and they'll do it again. But they are limited in the speed at which they can cause that destruction. We have protections, something that at least slows down their rate of chaos and allows future responsible governments to fix much of the damage. So I would suggest that the top priority for everyone this general election is Brexit, even if you're sick of it and think other things are more important. Those other things are entirely dependent on the Brexit process. We simply can't address anything else in earnest until Brexit has been stopped. Even Boris Johnson's saying that. Even he acknowledges that people don't actually think Brexit is important. He said yesterday, I think it was, We need to get Brexit done so we can concentrate on the things that you think are important. Now, I'm a party political beast of sorts myself, but our EU membership is simply the linchpin to everything. I'm lucky in a way because I will be voting for my party and still voting tactically. But were I in a different constituency under different circumstances, I'd vote to stop Brexit above all else. I wouldn't hesitate. And that's because I can't get the sort of country I want outside of the EU. So the rest may have to wait, or it may not. I can't live in a UK with a great publicly funded NHS if Johnson gets his majority. I can't live in a UK with world-leading environmental standards if Johnson gets his majority. I can't live in a UK with a flourishing economy if Johnson gets his majority. And I can't live in a tolerant UK if, yes, Johnson gets his majority. It's impossible unless he's stopped. And the only way to stop him is to use our vote for that one purpose, transcending all others, not trying to use your vote hoping that we'll stop Johnson and you get everything else you want as well, being laser focused on that one goal, because if we are successful, then the other goals may come later. They may come at the same time. For some people, they'll come at the same time as well. But if we take our eyes off the prize and we try to gather too much up, we could end up losing everything. So I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.